My name is Linda Cooper, 64 years old, living quietly in Asheville, North Carolina. I spent my life as a head nurse, caring for my husband through illness, raising my son alone since he was in third grade. I never needed much, just wanted my child to be happy. That's why I bought them a house, paid off their student loans, and even covered the cost of a luxury cruise to celebrate their 10th wedding anniversary. I had packed my bags, wrapped a gift for my granddaughter, picked out my nicest dress, until the phone buzzed. A text message. Just 8 words, but they knocked the breath out of me. Mom, Rachel thinks you shouldn't come. They said the party was for family only. So what am I then? Have you ever been pushed aside by the very people you love most? If this story touches something in you, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to the channel. Because what I'm about to tell you might just change how you see the word family. I set the phone down on the table as if it had become something foreign. The screen went dark, but those words burned into my vision. For family only. I stood in the living room, where pictures of Brian as a child once filled the walls, now cold and empty, like a museum of nameless sacrifices. I remembered that autumn afternoon when I brought Brian home from the hospital after a minor car accident in 6th grade. His arm was in a cast, cheeks streaked with tears. He clung to me, sobbing, "Mom, please never leave me." I never did. After my husband died of a stroke, I worked overnight shifts at the hospital while juggling bills, meals, and Brian's homework. I had no parents to lean on, no close relatives willing to help. It was just me, Brian, and nights without sleep. For years, I held 2 jobs, one in the emergency room, one at a nursing home. I never told Brian about the times I fainted from exhaustion on the last bus ride home, or the calluses on my hands from lifting patients. All I wanted was for Brian to grow up without feeling deprived. When he got into college, I pawned my old car and drained every penny from my savings to pay for his first semester. Every time Brian called from his dorm and said, "Mom, I need more money for books," I picked up an extra night shift. I never asked how much he was spending or why he needed a new laptop mid-semester. I just sent the money. Because that's what a mother does. Then he brought Rachel home, a girl with a bright smile and eyes that sparkled with cheer. She called me Mom, too, brought muffins every weekend, and always held Brian's arm just right. I remember her first dinner at my house. She looked around my old kitchen and whispered, "Feels like coming home." I loved her from the start. I once told Gloria that Rachel felt like a gift from life to make up for all the losses I'd endured. I started letting Rachel handle some of my small expenses, trusted her like the daughter I never had. Then they got married, a simple but warm ceremony. I paid for the wedding, the honeymoon, even the dress Rachel wore down the aisle. I picked it with her. She hugged me tight and said, "I hope that one day, if I have a daughter, I'll be the kind of mother you are." But everything changed after Emma was born. Rachel became calculating. She wanted to control every household expense, from utility bills to what gifts I gave Emma on her birthday. Once, I bought Emma a tiny gold bracelet. Rachel smirked and said, "Mother Linda, she's only 2. You don't have to prove anything." I swallowed my pride. Another time, I stopped by unannounced to visit Emma. Rachel stood in the doorway and said, "Mom, we're busy today. Maybe another time." Ugh. I drove home in silence, the gift still untouched in its paper bag. I turned down a good man named Frank. He was a supervisor at the nursing home where I worked. He invited me to dinner on Christmas night after my shift. I wore the green silk dress he had given me, but just as I was about to leave, Brian called. "Mom, can you watch Emma tonight? Rachel's not feeling well." I folded the dress back into its box and went to my son's house, like a live-in babysitter on standby. Frank understood, but never called again. I used to think that was a worthy sacrifice. A mother can't afford to be selfish. But now, when I'm not invited on a cruise I paid for, I realize Maybe I was never truly seen as family in their eyes. Rachel controls all the finances. Every payment, investment, even my life insurance was something she offered to streamline. I signed papers she brought me because I trusted her, just like I had trusted Brian. Now I've been left behind, like a worn-out item no longer useful. I stepped out onto the balcony, looking down at the neighborhood bathed in sunset. Across the street, someone's porch light glowed a warm yellow. The scent of grilled meat drifted through the air, reminding me of summer evenings when I'd set the table on the lawn, grill hamburgers for everyone, listen to Emma's laughter, and hear Rachel say, "Mother Linda, your food's better than any restaurant." Were those moments ever real, or did they disappear the moment I stopped giving? I wondered, if I hadn't paid for that house, hadn't covered the tuition, hadn't been a volunteer nanny for Emma, would they still need me? I gave everything so my child wouldn't feel unloved, but maybe I taught them love never needed to be returned. And maybe it's time I learned that for myself. That night, I sat in the living room with the lights dimmed, my hand resting on the phone like it held the last thread to something I couldn't name. After a while, I dialed Gloria's number. She picked up after the third ring. "Linda? It's late. Is everything okay?" I swallowed hard. I don't even know anymore. I feel like I've been erased from my own child's life. There was a pause. Then her voice softened. "What happened?" I told her about the message, about the cruise I wasn't invited to, though I had paid for it all. I spoke about Rachel, the cold look in her eyes lately, the way her words felt polite but distant. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I just told her the truth, the way an old, lonely woman might speak when trying to understand what the word family really means. When I finished, Gloria asked plainly, "Are you still listed on the house deed?" Her question made me pause. I blinked, trying to recall. When we bought it, yes. But a few months later, Rachel said we should transfer it to their names for tax reasons and to apply for home renovation programs. She brought the documents. I signed. "Was it notarized?" Gloria asked, her tone lower. "Of course." Rachel said she invited someone she knew. "Young woman, very sweet. Everything happened quickly. Do you have copies?" I said nothing. On the other end, I heard Gloria sigh. "Linda, do you know how many ways financial abuse of the elderly happens? It's often disguised as helping, simplifying, or just paperwork. You'd be shocked how many mothers have their assets signed away by their own kids or in-laws while still alive and well." A chill ran down my spine. Gloria continued, calm but firm. "If you're no longer on the deed, if your bank accounts have a cosigner, you need to start looking into this. Right away." I looked toward the wooden drawer where I kept old documents. "I don't really remember. Maybe I just trusted too much?" "That's not your fault," Gloria said. "But from now on, you have to protect yourself." After hanging up, I sat for a long while before getting up and pulling out the old laptop from my home office. It ran slowly, like my own fingers trembling over each key as I typed into the bank login page. The password was still Brian's birthday. I never changed it, partly out of habit, partly because I've always tied myself to him. When the account opened, everything looked normal. The balance was what I expected. But then I scrolled down to the transaction history. My eyes stopped on a $250 transfer, labeled home maintenance. I hadn't hired anyone to fix the house in over a year. I kept scrolling. 3 more transactions, each under $300, spaced roughly a month apart. Notes like emergency repair or monthly utility adjustment. I blinked. A few small charges could be easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but they were consistent, systematic. I clicked on one of the details. The recipient was a sub-account linked to a secondary card named R. Cooper. "Rachel, My grip on the mouse tightened until my fingers went numb. I opened another tab, logged into my savings account. A series of small withdrawals showed up, all routed to the same account. The amounts weren't huge on their own, but over 18 months, they added up to enough to buy a new car. I clicked on the account settings. Under Manage Secondary Users, Rachel's name was listed clearly, with nearly full control. She could withdraw, transfer, issue new cards, even close the account without my confirmation. I sat there in silence. My heart wasn't racing, I wasn't panicking, just cold and hollow, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I tried to remember what I had signed, when, where, in what context. But I couldn't recall. I only remembered Rachel bringing over a stack of documents, neatly clipped, laying them on the kitchen table. "Just sign where I've marked, Mom. These are the new federal forms. Taxes are trickier this year." I had picked up the pen, didn't ask, didn't read, because I thought, my daughter-in-law would never do anything to hurt me. I was wrong. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in the life I had built. The account I'd spent my whole life saving into was bleeding numbers I never even saw. I closed the laptop and sat still in the soft yellow light of the kitchen. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. But something inside me began to shift. Maybe it was trust cracking, or maybe clarity finally speaking up. Either way, silence no longer felt like a safe option. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, those numbers flashed in my mind like tiny blades carving through broken trust. $200, $305, $181. Not large enough to set off alarms, but persistent enough to drain a lifetime's savings. At nearly 3 a.m., I turned on the kitchen light, poured a glass of water, and reopened the laptop. The transactions didn't stop at my main account. In the automatic payments section, I discovered a chain of monthly charges: care expense, preventive health, property upkeep. I lived alone, I was still in good health. The small rental I stayed in, I cleaned and maintained it myself. No one was caring for me. No one had been hired to do those things. I wrote down every transaction, every description, timestamp, confirmation code. Then I matched them to the card activity. The name R. Cooper showed up so often I felt nauseated. Rachel. She had created a secondary card from my main account. Every purchase, every payment, every withdrawal left a mark. But I had never received any alerts. Rachel must have changed the email and contact details early on. I trusted too much, so I never noticed. I remembered one November morning, Rachel had shown up at my door with a bag of cinnamon rolls and a bright smile. "Mom, I just dropped by the bank to take care of some paperwork. They mentioned we could add a secondary card to your account for medical costs in case of emergencies. That way you won't have to worry about calling me." I remembered nodding without hesitation. She always said things that made me feel cared for, protected, but now I realized inside those sweet words was a maze she'd built long before, waiting for me to walk in blindly. I couldn't wait until morning. I called the bank directly. After a few transfers, a customer service rep named Daniel picked up. His voice was calm, professional, but my throat still felt dry as I asked, "I'd like to confirm whether anyone else has access to my account?" "Yes, Miss Linda Cooper, let me look that up. Yes, according to our system, there's currently one secondary authorized user, Rachel Cooper." I gripped the phone. Since when has she been authorized? The authorization was signed and notarized on April 17th last year. It's a full power of attorney. Includes access, withdrawals, adding cards, transferring funds, even changing contact info. My throat closed up. "Do you have a copy of that file?" "Yes, ma'am. I can email it to you or have it printed at your nearest branch." I leaned back into the chair, eyes shut, lips pressed so tightly they stung. April 17th, that day I had the flu. Rachel had dropped by with a young woman in a black blazer, introduced her as a mobile notary. I could barely remember her face. I spoke into the phone, voice hoarse. "I want to immediately revoke all secondary access. Can you do that?" Daniel hesitated. "Because it's a notarized power of attorney, we'll need a formal written request from you to rescind it, along with verification from either an attorney or an independent notary." "Then I'll prepare it," I said, and hung up. I stayed in the dark for a while longer, hands still resting on the keyboard. Not shaking, not furious, just a feeling like waking from a long dream and realizing I'd been asleep too long. I remembered what Gloria once said, back when she'd defended elder clients in court. Family abuse is the hardest to spot, because it doesn't leave bruises on skin. It etches itself into trust. I looked around my little kitchen. The cabinets I'd repainted myself, the old dining table I'd salvaged from a thrift store and fixed, one chair at a time. Nothing was expensive, but each thing was a part of my life. And yet, I had let someone sink their claws into my finances, my memories, even my dignity, because I thought love meant absolute trust. I picked up my notebook and began writing, slowly but firmly. April 17th, signed power of attorney. Last 18 months, suspicious transactions. Bank confirmed secondary card Rachel Cooper, full access. Access 3 times. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. I could hear birds calling from the trees behind the house, but the sound no longer felt peaceful. I trusted the wrong person, let myself be turned into a walking wallet, manipulated by things called convenience, for mom. And now I know. There is no real love in anything that demands you sign away your own existence. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a pale golden hue over the kitchen table. I was still sitting there since dawn, with the file folder open, my bank transactions still glowing on the laptop screen. A question kept echoing in my head, one I'd never dared to ask. How could I have signed something like that without knowing? I remember clearly it was a rainy day. Rachel had come over with a young brunette woman in a black blazer, carrying a stack of documents and a leather case. Rachel said I looked tired that day. I had just come back from the clinic, down with the flu, my throat raw, my head foggy from cold medicine. She rubbed my shoulder. "Mom, these papers are just in case you're unwell, so we can help you handle payments if needed. You know how complicated finances are these days. I just want you to rest and not worry about anything." I remember Rachel holding my hand tightly, her eyes glassy like she hadn't slept from worrying. "If something happens, I need to be able to make decisions for you. I don't want to be stuck outside a hospital unable to sign your medical forms because of legal restrictions." I was too weak to argue. The notary sat across from me, smiling gently. "I just need you to confirm you're fully aware while signing." I nodded, hesitated, then signed. No questions, no reading line by line. I was used to trusting family. I'd lived that way all my life. But this morning, when I asked the bank to send me a copy of the power of attorney, all the sugar-coated words fell away. I sat there reading each black printed line on white paper, my heart clenched like someone had wrapped it in a fist. Full financial power of attorney. No expiration, no condition for revocation, even if the grantor becomes mentally incapacitated. Grantee, Rachel Lynn Cooper. Authorized powers include asset transfers, mortgage and loan agreements, access and modifications to all account structures, signing of medical, insurance, property, and tax documents on behalf of the grantor, and then the part that took the breath out of me. The last italicized line stated, "The grantee may act in full capacity for all financial and medical decisions if Mrs. Linda Cooper is deemed legally incompetent." I froze at the words legally incompetent. I'd spent nearly 40 years as a head nurse. I'd seen hundreds of elderly people lose control over their own lives because of one sentence like that. I had been the one to tell patients' families, We can't take direction from your parent anymore. They signed full POA to someone else. And now, the person losing control was me. I took a deep breath, my palms cold. She had planned everything. A mild flu, cold medicine, a rainy afternoon, a notary arranged in advance, and me, the mother who thought she still held the reins, sitting there signing her own sentence. I remember Rachel faking a dizzy spell at the clinic not long ago. I had taken her to a second prenatal checkup. She stood up after the doctor left, stumbled, then dropped onto the seat. I rushed over. She whispered, "I think my blood pressure dropped." I'd been under so much stress, I don't know if I can handle everything. I had hugged her like my own daughter. I even offered to give them more money if they needed. It had all been orchestrated. I used to think Rachel was a thoughtful daughter-in-law. I used to feel moved when she brought me vitamins, made chicken soup when I was tired. But now I understand. None of it was love. It was all part of a long game to win my trust. I looked again at the copy of the power of attorney. My name sat at the top. Alone. Exposed. Rachel had every legal right that no stranger should ever have. If I fell ill tomorrow, legally she could sell my house, freeze my assets, move everything into her name, and I'd have no say. I got up and walked to the window. Outside, the neighbor was mowing his lawn. The machine hummed in steady rhythm. On a normal morning, I'd pour some tea and sit on the balcony watching the sky brighten. But not today. Today, everything had changed. I had just discovered I was standing on the edge of being legally erased from my own life. No court order needed. I turned back inside and picked up the phone. "Gloria," I said, my voice low, "we need to talk. And I need a real attorney, not just advice." On the other end, she didn't ask questions. She just replied, "10 a.m. tomorrow, my old office. Bring everything you have." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I walked back to the table and slipped the power of attorney copy into a fresh folder, but I labeled it with a small sticker. I wrote in black ink, "Evidence." Because from this moment on, I was no longer a bystander. I was a witness, and I was going to fight back. I arrived at Gloria's law office nearly 30 minutes early, carrying an old leather case packed with every document, statement, printout from the bank, even that dreaded copy of the power of attorney. Every step I took felt steady, like my body already understood there was no room left for hesitation. Gloria was waiting with 2 hot coffees and a stack of documents open. No pleasantries. We sat down like soldiers returning to a battlefield we both knew. "Good, you brought everything," Gloria said, her eyes quickly scanning the folders I laid out. "Now it's time to act step by step. But first we need someone outside to monitor Rachel's finances without raising suspicion." I nodded. "I'm ready." Gloria reached for the office phone. "I know someone. Used to be with the FBI, now a private investigator. His name's Mark Delaney." Discreet. Sharp. 30 minutes later, Mark walked into the conference room. Around 50, tall, upright posture, eyes scanning like he'd already mapped the whole room in the first few seconds. I shook his hand. My palm still cold. "I'll need everything," Mark said, calm and direct. "Full name, social security number if you have it, current address, suspected accounts, and especially any major asset transfers." I opened my file, pointing to the marked sections. "The house I once bought for my son. It's no longer in my name. I suspect they used it for collateral." Mark flipped through silently. "You think they used it as loan collateral?" "I don't just think," I said, voice firming. "I believe they already did, and I was never asked." He frowned slightly. "We'll check the property records right away. Could be through a broker or the county recorder's office." While Gloria and Mark reviewed the paperwork, I submitted a request to open an entirely new bank account, under only my name. No linked cards, no joint access, nothing. I chose a small local bank, safer, lower profile. When the staff member asked, Would you like to add a family member for emergencies? I shook my head and answered simply, I can handle it myself. It took less than an hour to complete. I withdrew all cash from the old account, revoked all authorizations, and requested full cancellation of the linked card. The teller nodded. After today, no one but you can touch this account. I let out a soft breath, as if I had just pulled a part of my life back into my own hands. By late afternoon, Mark called again. I have new information, and it won't be easy to hear. We met at a small coffee shop not far from the law office. Mark arrived right on time, carrying his laptop and a stack of printed documents. He opened the property ownership screen on his laptop. Rachel Cooper has been listed as a co-owner of the house since a year ago, and 3 months ago she signed a second mortgage agreement with a private financial firm to secure investment capital. I held my breath. For what? Mark placed another sheet of paper in front of me. A golf resort development project in the southern area of Charlotte. The first phase just broke ground. Rachel is listed as a third-tier individual investor, using a jointly titled property as collateral for a loan of nearly $300,000. My hand trembled. That house? I paid for it entirely in cash. I used all my savings, even my pension. Mark nodded. That's why, unless you have official documentation proving deception, legally speaking, you no longer hold control. I sat in silence. Around me was the hum of the coffee grinder, the warm scent of baked goods, but all my senses felt distant, pulled into a space where I had been erased from my own life, with signatures gathered in sickness, trust, and loneliness. Do you want to take this all the way? Mark asked, looking directly at me. What do you mean? Take it to court, reclaim the property, file formal charges of financial abuse against an elder. If you're ready, Gloria and I will coordinate everything. I looked out the window. Dusk had started to fall. Somewhere outside, another grandmother might be walking hand in hand with her granddaughter, laughing, enjoying a peaceful evening. That wasn't my place anymore. I turned back, slowly. I don't want revenge, but I can't let them take anything else from me. Mark nodded and began drafting the initial report. Gloria called right then and said, The paperwork to reverse the property transfer is being prepared. You'll come sign tomorrow. Then we'll file the formal claim. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Something inside me had shifted. Not anger, but a clear sense of my own worth. I had once signed out of love. This time, I would sign to reclaim the part of my life someone else had quietly stolen. That Wednesday afternoon, Mark called with a tone I hadn't heard from him before. Not cold, not rushed, just cautious, as if measuring every word to keep me from breaking. I found something in the National Insurance Report, he said. We'd better meet in person. I arrived at Gloria's office in under an hour. Mark was already there, laptop open, hand resting on a folder stamped in red. Gloria glanced at me, then softly said, You need to stay calm. Mark turned the screen toward me. It showed a life insurance policy worth $300,000. Policyholder, Linda Cooper. Signed, 8 months ago. Primary beneficiary, Rachel Lynn Cooper. I closed my eyes. My nose stung with heat. When did she do this? I asked, my voice hoarse. The file was submitted on June 15th, around the same time as the second mortgage application. Mark slid a printed copy across the table. I checked the signature. The registration copy wasn't signed by you. There's no fingerprint or verified photo at the time of signing. Gloria nodded. This is our first solid proof of identity fraud, and if we compare it to your verified signature samples, the difference is clear. I held up the document and looked at the shaky, uneven scrawl at the bottom. A sloppy signature, completely unlike mine, but bearing my name. Mark opened another set of documents. In the loan files, Rachel not only used the power of attorney, but also submitted a medical assessment. He paused, looking at me. It's a signed report by a doctor. Unclear if real, stating that Mrs. Linda Cooper is showing early signs of cognitive decline, including disorientation and mild memory loss. My chest tightened, not from anger but from a deep, bitter humiliation. They hadn't just stolen my money. They were rewriting my mental capacity on paper with words signed by people I once called family. I spoke slowly, each word pulled from deep within. Rachel is trying to erase me legally by claiming I'm no longer competent? Mark gave a subtle nod. Gloria reached over and placed a new folder on the table. I've prepared the formal complaint. It includes the following charges: forged signature, insurance fraud, financial abuse of an elder, using false information in financial transactions, and falsifying medical records. I looked through each page one by one. My name appeared everywhere, but never as who I truly was. They had created a version of me that was weak, confused, incapable of managing my own assets. Mark played a recording he had obtained while posing as an auditor, calling the insurance company's support team. Rachel's voice came through clearly. Yes, she's my mother-in-law. We've been taking care of her ever since the symptoms started. I handle all her finances now, since she often gets confused about this or that bill. I sat there, hearing my own daughter-in-law call me a burden, with such calmness, such ease, as if she truly believed she was doing the right thing. Gloria quietly hit pause. They're preparing for the final move, Linda. That move is to remove you entirely. From records, from accounts, and, if necessary, from medical decisions down the line. I sat up straight. How much time do I have before they make that move? Gloria didn't respond right away. Finally, she said, "We're not waiting. We go first." Mark flipped to the last page in the folder and handed me a summary titled, Litigation File v. Linda Cooper versus Rachel Lynn Cooper. I signed it, not out of rage, but with complete clarity. I would no longer let my kindness be used as someone else's stepping stone, and I wouldn't allow anyone to write the rest of my story without my permission. They left on Monday morning, catching an early flight to Honolulu. Rachel posted a photo of a coconut cocktail with a purple orchid, captioned, "Family is everything." Brian held Emma on the beach, grinning as if their life was one perfect vacation paid for in love instead of someone else's money. As for me, I didn't go to the airport. I didn't look at the photos. I was at the notary's office, finalizing the sale of a land parcel that used to belong to me before Rachel illegally transferred the title. I had held on to a small sublot still in my name, never transferred because Rachel assumed it was just a useless side yard. But to the development firm Gloria had connected me with, it was a strategic key to expanding their new residential project. The contract was processed quickly. They paid in full, in cash, wired directly into a trust account solely under my name. That account wasn't linked to any bank Rachel knew. No secondary cards, no provisional beneficiaries, just me. At the same time, Mark had filed a civil petition requesting a freeze on all contested assets. The order was approved in less than 2 days. A notice was posted at the gate of the house on Cedar Street, the one Rachel still believed was hers, clearly stating, "This property is under legal investigation. All sales, mortgages, or renovations are hereby suspended." No one was allowed access. Any loans under Rachel's name, using that property as collateral, were immediately flagged as high risk. 3 days later, I received a new email. Sender, Rachel Lynn Cooper. Subject, urgent. I opened it and skimmed. Mom, I just got a notice from the bank denying my refinancing request. The broker called and said the house is legally frozen? What's going on? Do you know anything? Below were lines of confused questions, scattered with phrases like, "We need to talk. Can you explain this?" There must be some misunderstanding. I set down my tea and typed a brief reply. Just tidying things up a bit. Then I hit send. No extra words. No anger, no blame, no explanations. That was enough. Minutes later, a second email arrived, quicker than the first. Mom, please, we're out of state. I can't manage this from Hawaii. I need to know what's happening. You can't just do this on your own. I didn't respond. That afternoon, I went to a second notary office to sign the final documents formally separating my ownership from all remaining joint assets: the car under both names, the healthcare insurance records, and the land rights behind the old house. Everything was now sealed under strict legal protections. Anyone, Cooper name or not, would need a court order to touch any of it, and that order would have to go through a stack of fraud claims, falsified documents, and violations of elder protection laws. That evening, I sat in my small apartment, watching the sunset stretch across my window pane. There were no more little feet running down the hallway, no soft floral perfume lingering in the air from Rachel's visits. But there was also no longer the feeling of being trapped in a role. I was no longer playing the doting mother just to be labeled a burden behind my back. I no longer forced smiles while being written out of what mattered. Now, everything was clear. They thought I would stay quiet. They didn't realize silence can be the loudest voice, when it's intentional, when it's calculated. Silence with purpose. Silence strong enough to dismantle a game someone else thought they'd already won. That afternoon, I stood by the front gate, wrapped in a dark brown coat, my eyes steady and resolute. The street was empty, a few dry leaves falling gently onto the sidewalk. The air felt heavier than usual. I could feel the tension in every breath. When Brian and Rachel's car approached, I saw the change in their eyes. Rachel looked down, trying to stay composed. Brian gripped the steering wheel tightly. The car pulled up and they stepped out, but it didn't feel like a homecoming after vacation. The iron gate was chained and locked, with a small metal sign reading, "Property under legal dispute per court order." In front of the house, a tow truck waited, already hauling away their SUV. Rachel looked up, then turned to Brian, panic barely concealed. Brian mumbled something, visibly shaken. As they approached the front door, they were stopped by a court summons taped neatly across the wooden entrance. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding a thick file. Evidence Mark and I had gathered meticulously. I faced them, unwavering. Brian spoke first, voice tense and tinged with frustration. "Mom, what is this? Why is all this happening? We did everything to make sure you were well taken care of, so you wouldn't have to worry about a thing." Rachel chimed in, her tone pleading with a hint of performance. "Mom, Linda, I only wanted the best for you. If something's wrong, we can talk. Please don't blow this out of proportion." I looked at them, silent for a beat, then slowly opened the file. "This isn't small, Brian. Rachel, this is evidence you used my trust and love to take not just my assets, but control over my life." I laid out the documents one by one, the full financial power of attorney I was never informed about, granting them sweeping authority. Mortgage contracts Rachel signed without my consent. Investigative reports from Mark detailing forgery and financial abuse, and a recording of Rachel calmly claiming she handled my finances, like she was discussing caretaking, not control. "You gambled with my love," I said, voice steady but sharp, "and you lost." Brian and Rachel stood frozen, their faces shifting from anger to disbelief. Rachel tried to speak, but only let out a shaky breath. Brian lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. I went on, "I gave you everything, not just money, but trust. But now, I won't let you turn me into a puppet in your game. These," I raised the file, "are what's keeping me alive. They're the truth you tried to bury." The room fell into silence. Only the wind whispering through the cracks and the ticking of the wall clock filled the air. In their eyes, I saw the fear of being exposed. "I'm not out for revenge," I added, "but I will fight for myself." Rachel stepped forward, not to protest, but to meet my eyes. They were tired, tinged with regret. "Mom, we were wrong. I'm sorry." Brian stood behind her, exhaling like a man who had just realized he'd lost something he'd never fully appreciated. I closed my eyes briefly, trying to push aside the scars, the overlooked sacrifices. All that remained was the resolve to never allow this betrayal to repeat. That day, the house was no longer just a place. It became a battlefield where I reclaimed the right to live fully, to be respected, and to never be erased from my own life. My new apartment sits at the end of a tree-lined road, just minutes from a quiet lake. It's not large, not luxurious, and it doesn't have the stone walls the old house boasted. But everything in it is mine. Every chair, every picture frame, even the smallest spoon in the drawer. I chose them. No interference, no pressure. Every morning, I wake up early, brew a cup of black coffee, crack open the window to let in the soft dawn light, and quietly jot down a few lines in my notebook, like a way of stitching back the torn parts inside me. Nearby, there's a small gardening club started by a group of older women. They invited me to join after our first meeting at the local farmers market. I still remember a woman named Margaret, short silver hair, telling stories while planting flowers, how her husband once grew so many tomatoes that the neighbors thought he was starting a business. I laughed, genuinely, a light, unforced laugh. In that space, I began to discover mornings that didn't start with demanding messages. No one asked for money to fix up something small. It was just soil, seeds, birdsong, and conversations that didn't begin with "Mom." One afternoon, while watering plants in the small courtyard behind my building, my phone buzzed with a new message. The screen showed the sender. Brian. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. Rachel. She was wrong, but so was I. I just want to ask, can Emma see her grandma again? She keeps asking about you." I didn't open it right away. I set the phone down, washed my hands, brewed a cup of mint tea, and sat out on the porch, looking toward the lake, where the sunlight shimmered on the water. The willow trees on both banks drooped gracefully, as if sheltering the ripples below. I'm not cold-hearted. I'm not a grandmother who doesn't love her grandchild. I held Emma when she was just a newborn, sang to her the same lullabies I once sang to Brian. But those memories now lay buried beneath the image of her mother, standing in front of the courthouse, pretending to choke back tears while holding contracts in my name. I picked up the phone and read the message again. I felt no anger and no forgiveness. Just the quiet realization that some wounds can't be healed with an apology that comes too late. I deleted the message, no hesitation. The following week, our garden group built a new row of beds beside the carrot patch. Alice brought a basket of warm apple turnovers. Jean came with a jug of chilled cucumber juice. We sat in the shade, talking about the coming winter and what flowers to plant for spring. No one asked me what I used to do for a living, how many children I had, or where I used to live. Here, I didn't need to prove I was worthy of love. I just had to be me. A 64-year-old woman learning how to live for herself. Late that afternoon, I walked along the lake path. The water lay still, reflecting the purple sky. I stood in silence, listening to the breeze rustle through the reeds, feeling no ripple inside me. I whispered, almost to myself, "They thought I couldn't live without them, but I've only just begun to live." I once believed silence was the way to hold on to family. But now I understand, sometimes, silence at the right moment is the strongest shield. It isn't surrender, it's the choice to rise. With quiet, unshakable resolve. I walked slowly back to my small apartment at the end of the lane. Each step felt lighter, as if the weight of all those heavy years had begun to fall away behind me. I used to stay silent to keep the family together, but now, it's that very silence that protects me. And what about you? If one day you discovered that those you loved most had quietly erased you from your own life, what would you do? Would you stay silent and endure it, or quietly stand and rewrite your own ending? I believe everyone listening to this story carries a scar, big or small, fresh or long faded. Family isn't always a safe place. And love, doesn't always come with respect. Sometimes the moment we dare to stop, to step outside that sacred-looking circle, is the moment we begin to truly live. If this story stirred something inside you, if it made you pause and reflect, please share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Because every voice matters, and who knows, your words might calm the storm in someone else's heart. And if you'd like to keep hearing real stories about family, about hurt, and about healing, don't forget to follow the channel. Some things we only find the courage to face when we know we're not alone.